kind of the theoretical. But I want to insist that this is necessary because this machinic practicism that Land insisted on leads to a kind of practical impotence. Okay? So I want to insist that it's necessary to confront fundamental kind of conceptual issues before you can begin to understand what it is you're doing. Okay? And I think, in that regard, I don't buy into the whole rhetoric about the need to kind of ditch representation. And I think if you try to ditch representation, get beyond conceptual representation, etc., I think you end up with a kind of you engender performative contradiction, not just theoretical contradiction, but performative contradiction. In other words, a contradiction at the level of concepts manifests itself in terms of an incapacity at the level of practice. Okay? So that's why I'm going to operate in this way, and I'm going to do it by schematizing, schematizing Nick's work or agenda in terms of three contrasts, three explicitly dialectical contrasts. And the point is that where a kind of machinic pragmatism insists on the need to kind of to resist and to obviate any kind of dialectical antagonism or opposition, I think it's necessary to do that in order to be able to kind of to identify what its strengths and weaknesses are. The 3 points I want to focus on, or the 3 kind of dyads, are critique and materialism, teleology and eschatology, and practicism and voluntarism. First of all, what makes well, as Mark's already said, I think I speak here as Robin Mackay and I are editing a volume of Land's writings called Fang Noumena. These texts are pretty extraordinary, okay? And as Mark said, no matter how much one may detest, their kind of their rhetorical kind of animus, etc., etc., it's simply kind of it's not enough simply to kind of to dismiss them as a kind of puerile, indulgent kind of hyper-Nietzscheanism. It's far more sophisticated than that, even if I do think it is ultimately kind of stymied by incoherences. And on any account, rereading those texts, I mean, these are extraordinary texts, okay? And they certainly, they're a kind of they provide a sobering contrast with the kind of the flaccid inanity of contemporary kind of Bergsonian vitalism. And the French philosopher Vincent Descamps once described Deleuze-Guattari's Anti-Oedipus and Lyotard's Libidinal Economy in terms of what he calls, as manifestations of what he called mad black Hegelianism. Okay? An attempt to kind of to find some kind of the prosecution of a kind of Marxist materialism that somehow would be kind of anti-Hegelian. In the same regard, like Land's work is a kind of mad black Deleuzianism. It's an attempt to kind of to turn Deleuze's the vitalist impetus, the affirmationist élan that animates Deleuze-Guattarian corpus into something much more ostensibly kind of unsavory, but also actually much more conceptually invigorating. And it's what's really interesting, as Mark said, is that there's a kind of, what's really interesting in these texts is the way in which there's a kind of extraordinary re-elaboration of negativity, a kind of non-conceptual negativity, and the kind of these texts bristle with this kind of sublimated fury, and that's what makes them kind of really powerful. And because I'm really interested in this issue about the power, and in fact, I want to try to show that it's possible to kind of to rehabilitate the powers of the negative against what Ben Noyes has called this kind of affirmationist consensus in contemporary theory. This is a moment in Land's work that I'm acutely interested in. Although I'll try to explain why I think he kind of he doesn't succeed in wresting the negative from a kind of from subordinating it to a kind of affirmation. Okay, these preliminaries aside. First of all, the Land sets out his, he's operating under the aegis of kind of Guattari's work. He proposes to radicalize critique, to convert the ideal conditioning of the representation of matter to the material conditioning of ideal representation. So that in the Landian kind of apparatus, matter becomes, materiality is construed solely as the production of production. Okay?